This development has just erupted in Washington. 34 Republicans have come out in support of a 25th Amendment effort targeting Donald Trump. This isn't mere political spectacle. It's methodical, it's coordinated, and it's progressing quickly. Yet here's the aspect no one is voicing openly. As the GOP splits internally, Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney is subtly preparing for the repercussions. The upcoming 72 hours will determine more than a single presidency. They might alter the power dynamics throughout North America. Stick around, since this narrative is larger than it appears. Here's what you must grasp immediately. This didn't emerge unexpectedly. The 25th Amendment isn't a tool legislators mention lightly. It's the constitutional crisis mechanism. For 34 Republicans to openly support it indicates that something within the framework activated alerts at the top echelons. On late Tuesday evening, key congressional staff received alerts about an urgent national security session. The gathering, per two aides who attended, focused on a series of presidential orders that sparked concerns across various agencies simultaneously. These weren't small policy adjustments. They were sudden commands with global ramifications. One order allegedly indicated an examination of U.S. obligations to NATO's financial frameworks. Another entailed an immediate reevaluation of transborder infrastructure pacts with Canada. A third directed commerce authorities to ready intensification plans aimed at Canadian farm products and metal if collaboration standards weren't achieved in a specified time frame. That term itself, collaboration standards, caused ripples through foreign relations networks. Now, stop and consider the implications. Canada isn't merely a commerce associate. It's the biggest market for American exports and its nearest defense partner. The logistics networks linking the nations are profoundly interwoven. Power systems interconnect. Vehicle production traverses boundaries several times prior to finishing a car. Grain, petroleum, aluminum, these aren't theoretical goods. They represent everyday financial lifelines. And leading Canada's approach is Mark Carney. Carney isn't a lifelong politician who responds impulsively. He established his worldwide standing by handling widespread threats amid economic downturns. Reliability is his hallmark. Consistency is his advantage. Thus, when indicators from Washington shifted swiftly in a day-long period, Ottawa didn't counter with media events. It countered with discrete simulations. Per economic experts in Toronto, emergency situations are currently undergoing rigorous evaluations should U.S. presidential control change abruptly. That's not standard. That's readiness for instability. Returning to Washington, the 34 Republicans supporting the measure cross philosophical divides. Some hail from competitive areas where electoral endurance relies on balance. Others originate from secure right-wing territories lacking voting motivation to defy. That mix is what renders this grave. It implies the worry isn't solely tactical maneuvering. It implies organizational unease. The measure avoids dramatic wording. It references latest presidential behavior, prompting substantial inquiries about adherence to the Constitution and judgment reliability. Observe the terminology substantial inquiries. Reliability. This is the lexicon of threat evaluation, not factional fury. And here's the practical truth. The measure by itself can't oust a leader. It's a distress signal directed straight at the vice president and the administration. Per Section 4 of the 25th Amendment, they have to start the procedure. Absent them, progress halts. With them, authority changes right away. Within the White House, responses are divided. Supporters are portraying this as disloyalty. They contend that differing views on strategy are being transformed into legal assertions. But confidentially, certain high-level personnel are supposedly advocating restraint, cautioning that forceful rebuttals might push additional Republicans toward the measure. The vice president now serves as the pivot of the whole apparatus. If he indicates willingness to assess capability, administration officials will encounter instant demands to state their stances. If he rejects the initiative completely, the Republican group could broaden its visible efforts, heightening partisan tension. At the same time, Carney is observing attentively, since any fluctuation in U.S. presidential control generates prompt cascading impacts over security synchronization, northern tactics, and ongoing commerce discussions. Canada gains nothing from U.S. disorder, but it needs to anticipate it. And that's the element most news sources are overlooking. This isn't simply regarding inner Republican splits. It's regarding how a legal emergency within the United States promptly turns into a worldwide threat factor. 34 Republicans have already breached the boundary. Additional ones are said to be biding time. The administration remains quiet. The vice president is evaluating. Ottawa is simulating alternatives. And this is merely part one of a tale that's speeding up hourly. Now let's delve further, since part two is where the strain truly commences to mount. Following the crisis session, an atypical event occurred. Republican heads didn't promptly act to quash the measure. There were no swift rejections, no collective media appearance backing the leader. Rather, there was quietude. And in Washington, quietude often speaks more than anger. Several legislative aides are verifying that overnight telephone discussions started spreading among GOP participants soon after midnight. The inquiry wasn't partisan. It wasn't concerning surveys. It was concerning accountability. If presidential orders are subsequently deemed unconstitutional, who was aware of what and at what point? That inquiry by itself modifies conduct within Congress. Concurrently, legal experts started examining the presidential commands that ignited worry. One supposedly directed government bodies to investigate circumventing legislative budget restrictions to reallocate resources toward hastened boundary security measures. Another contained verbiage implying the leader might activate crisis financial authorities to supersede specific commerce steadiness provisions in current deals with Canada. And that's where this account spans frontiers once more, since those commerce steadiness provisions were bargained amid sensitive negotiations between Washington and Ottawa. They were crafted expressly to avert abrupt duty increases that might interrupt linked logistics networks. If those protections are merely examined, economies respond. Canadian economic observers started posing a straightforward yet potent inquiry. Is U.S. presidential control growing erratic? For Mark Carney, erraticism isn't merely partisan disturbance. It's a quantifiable financial hazard. Carney developed his profession by foreseeing widespread threats prior to them becoming evident to everyone. And individuals near his administration indicate he has conducted private meetings with commerce and security consultants since dawn today. But here's the surprise. Carney isn't openly faulting Trump. He isn't intensifying discourse. Rather, he is strengthening statements about steady North American collaboration and organizational persistence. That phrasing is deliberate. It conveys preparedness for alteration without publicly wagering on it. Returning to Washington, Republican legislators are confronting a distinct type of assessment. If the 25th Amendment procedure is officially activated, they eventually have to cast ballots. A two-thirds majority in each house would be necessary if the leader disputes ouster. That benchmark is enormous, but it turns feasible solely if drive accumulates. And drive frequently hinges on viewpoint. If electors start to think this concerns legal steadiness instead of factional competition, additional legislators might emerge. If it's depicted as factional undermining, the alliance could splinter. The vice president's administration has supposedly engaged in ongoing sessions with legal experts. The primary inquiry posed inside isn't if the leader possesses the right to release bold commands. It's if the sequence of judgments mirrors ability issues under Section 4 criteria. That difference is vital. The 25th Amendment isn't regarding discord, it's regarding incapability. At the same time, foreign watchers are monitoring intently. NATO authorities have confidentially voiced worry over any indicators implying financing doubt. European partners rely greatly on U.S. dependability. If Washington seems inwardly unsteady, foreign influence diminishes. And here's where Carney's approach grows even more compelling. Canada's financial ties with the United States are so entangled that abrupt presidential fluctuation can trigger cascading effects in mere hours. Power networks in specific areas span the frontier. Vehicle components can transfer between the nations several times prior to ultimate construction. Farm shipments function on strictly timed agreements. One sudden strategy change can upset countless enterprises. So what actions does Carney take? Per accounts from Ottawa sources, he is devising twin-path interaction tactics. One communication if Trump keeps complete control. Another if presidential control briefly transfers to the vice president. That degree of readiness indicates that Canada regards this circumstance as believable, not speculative. Within the Republican organization, strain is escalating. Certain participants who first wavered are now discreetly seeking secret sessions. Others are soliciting heads for more explicit direction. But heads themselves seem split between allegiance and organizational safeguarding. This is how legal emergencies develop, not via theatrical addresses, but via silent evaluations proliferating in private. The following 48 hours will probably decide if the vice president indicates willingness to the procedure. If that occurs, administration participants will be compelled to announce their stances. And once announcements start, drive either quickens or disintegrates. Simultaneously, international economies are starting to incorporate hazard. Not alarm, not breakdown, just hazard. And hazard is the single element that figures like Mark Carney always address. The United States is currently confronting an uncommon intersection: inner legal tension and outer financial vulnerability. 34 Republicans have started the ignition. The vice president controls the handle. The administration controls the mechanism. And Canada is already modifying its stance. Part 2 clarifies one matter. This is no longer conceptual. The framework is stressed, and when frameworks are stressed, results grow erratic. Now, Part 3 is where the implications shift from partisan to individual, since at the heart of this turmoil is one key figure, the vice president. Under Section 4 of the 25th Amendment, nothing advances without him. Congress can indicate, legislators can urge. Media can conjecture, but the activation is owned by one position. And per various accounts spreading in Washington, that position is in constant advisory state. Here's the situation the vice president is encountering. If he launches the 25th Amendment procedure with a majority of the administration, he promptly turns into interim leader. Control moves the instant the statement is presented to legislative heads. There is no delay interval, no ritual. It transpires immediately. But if he executes that action and Congress doesn't attain the 2/3 level needed to maintain it, the partisan consequences would be unprecedented. He would be seen by numerous within the organization as having tried to displace the leader of his own team. That sort of division doesn't mend rapidly. If he takes no action, though, and further disputed presidential commands heighten national or foreign strain, history might evaluate him otherwise. That is the unachievable equilibrium. Within the White House, aides are supposedly divided into 3 groups. The initial group claims that this is entirely partisan strain and should be openly suppressed. The second group thinks reduction is the more secure path. Less sudden commands, less evening directives, less unanticipated moves. The third group is discreetly questioning if the sequence of latest choices is viable extended term. That third group is the one legislators are monitoring. At the same time, Republican senators who endorsed the measure are confidentially justifying their choice as legal duty, not defiance. They claim that posing inquiries about ability doesn't equate to confirmation of inability. It equates to proper investigation. That depiction is important since it reduces the intensity sufficiently to prevent others from sensing they are violating a partisan boundary. But beyond the United States, the intensity is increasing. Mark Carney has now supposedly conducted talks with top security authorities concerning persistence guidelines in combined activities. Not since Canada anticipates prompt interruption, but since accountable guidance anticipates alternatives. Carney comprehends something essential. Legal doubt in Washington can convert into functional doubt overseas. Combined armed strategizing, data exchange, commerce assurances, these rely on distinct hierarchies of direction. If that hierarchy seems unsteady, even momentarily, partners must ready themselves. Economic markets are also responding in understated manners. Money dealers are observing the U.S. currency for indicators of fluctuation connected to partisan unsteadiness. Power experts are assessing transborder conduit vulnerability. None of this is theatrical, but it is quantifiable. Returning to Congress, the figure 34 is being scrutinized like an initial threshold. Legislators who didn't endorse are being questioned confidentially about their positions. Some are supposedly stating they are awaiting to observe if the vice president indicates willingness. Others are seeking extra secret sessions before executing any visible action. This is how drive accumulates, not via yelling, but via reluctance transforming into concordance. And here's another element that muddles all: community sentiment. Initial surveys imply the nation is split, but not predominantly opposed to the concept of examination. That provides wary Republicans partisan protection to depict their endorsement as defensive rather than hostile. The leader, at the same time, is reported to be enraged. Supporters are advancing the story that this is disloyalty motivated by apprehension of re-election appearances. But others near the circumstance imply that the actual worry within Republican head circles is erraticism. Erraticism weakens assurance. Assurance supports control. Control maintains guidance. And in Canada, Carney's group is observing the identical indicators. Since if presidential control in Washington transfers even briefly, discussions already progressing on commerce, reliability, and northern protection could be readjusted. A fresh interim leader would probably pursue prompt guarantees from partners. That generates advantage. Carney isn't inciting, he is situating. And this is where the account grows larger than one leadership. If an incumbent U.S. leader encounters a grave Section 4 contest started by participants of his own organization, the precedent solely redefines presidential authority for generations. Upcoming teams would function knowing that ability contests are not inconceivable. That option is what renders this instant landmark. The vice president is assessing heritage against fidelity. Republican legislators are assessing hazard against duty. The leader is displaying fortitude, and Mark Carney is readying for each conceivable result. Part 3 renders one matter indisputable. The choice is constricting, the strain is mounting, and the timer is running. Part 4 is where the timer turns tangible. Since if the vice president executes even a mild visible adjustment, a declaration regarding examining legal alternatives or discussing with administration heads, the whole procedure quickens right away. Economies respond, partners respond, legislators choose factions, and drive either advances rapidly or implodes from its own burden. Currently, Washington is functioning in a suspension state, but suspension states don't endure. They conclude. Top Republican planners are supposedly simulating 3 situations. Situation 1, the vice president staunchly declines the 25th Amendment initiative, depicting it as unneeded and disruptive. In that instance, the 34-participant alliance probably halts and the White House recovers story dominance. Situation 2, the vice president indicates worry but refrains from launching the procedure. That generates prolonged doubt, which might really heighten strain on administration participants. Situation 3, the vice president advances with administration discussions that result in an official statement. That is the legal upheaval. And if that upheaval transpires, the authority transfer is prompt. The vice president turns into interim leader the instant the statement is presented to legislative chiefs. No postponement, no handover phase. Control transfers in actual time. Envision the global consequences of that instant. Partners would pursue prompt guarantees. Economic markets would require transparency. Armed directives would need verification of persistence. And among the initial communications initiated from the executive suite, whether by the present leader protecting his control or by an interim leader affirming it, would be to primary partners. Canada would rank high on that roster. Mark Carney has constructed his partisan persona around organizational confidence. If presidential control in Washington transfers suddenly, he will act swiftly to obtain visible commitments regarding commerce pacts, security synchronization, and power reliability. That isn't exploitation. That is threat handling. In private, Canadian authorities are supposedly outlining interaction tactics for both results. If Trump maintains control, Ottawa stresses persistence and common financial goals. If control transfers to the vice president, Ottawa stresses organizational durability and rapid collaboration with the fresh interim heads. In either case, Carney evades seeming impulsive. He seems equipped. Returning within the United States, strain is also accumulating from another angle. Contributors and organization influencers. Prominent Republican donors are reported to be confidentially pressing for reliability. Partisan disorder impacts resource gathering, initiative planning, and elector assurance. If the view expands that the organization is descending, monetary backing constricts. Simultaneously, base enthusiasts loyal to Trump are organizing digitally. They are depicting the 25th Amendment initiative as disloyalty. That generates an additional dimension of strain for legislators pondering whether to endorse the measure. Each extra endorsement now bears genuine partisan expense. But here's the crucial aspect. Legal procedures aren't approval competitions. They are architectural tools. Once launched, they adhere to specified phases. If the leader challenges ouster, Congress has 21 days to ballot. 2/3 in each chamber is a tremendously elevated benchmark, but the presence of a valid contest by itself alters the leadership's functioning context. Presidential actions executed during that 21-day interval would be examined more rigorously than previously. That examination stretches past national strategy, commerce talks with Canada, protection conversations about northern surveillance paths, power shipment permissions. Each choice would be observed through the perspective of validity and reliability. Carney's group comprehends that. They also comprehend scheduling. If Washington seems inwardly separated, Canada can highlight dependability. Dependability turns into advantage in unsure instances. At the same time, Republican legislators who haven't yet stated their stances are observing one indicator above everything else: administration concordance. If primary administration officials indicate endorsement for examination, the view of gravity increases. If administration participants openly reject the initiative, the alliance hazards depleting vitality. This is the turning moment. The vice president is under landmark strain. Administration participants are balancing fidelity against heritage. Legislative Republicans are tallying ballots discreetly. The leader is displaying control, and Canada is discreetly strengthening alternative structures. Part 4 isn't regarding conjecture any longer. It is regarding certainty. A choice is approaching. A declaration will be issued. And once it is, the path grows far tougher to alter. The timer is no longer conceptual. It is quantified in hours.